Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the classic original 62 book series. And it's book number 23, Return of the Mummy. Now, to get things rolling, Return of the Mummy is not a book I've read often in my time reading this series. When I was a kid, I think I read this book maybe one time after Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. I think Curse of the Mummy's Tomb was in the first 10 books I ever read. Not in the top, not in my first five, but I think that one was one of the first ones, now that I think back on it. And this one I maybe read once or twice, and I never really had strong opinions about it. And after rereading it as an adult, I really have no interest in reading this book ever again next to Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. But I think this is a slight improvement to that first book. Not by much. Not by much. But yeah, if I had one thing to say about this book off the bat, it's just one of the just plain Jane fine Goosebumps books that you'll come across. There's nothing really wrong with it. There's nothing really spectacular about it either. It's just fine. It doesn't wow me or anything. And I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but yeah, this book is alright. So if you haven't read Return of the Mummy, go try it out. Maybe you might like it more than me. The only reason why I'm reading these books right now is because I have this plan I'm working towards with the dummy books and the mummy books that lead me up to the dummy meets the mummy. So when I get to that book, you know, that kind of like culminates the mummy books, and I thought that'd be a fun way to kind of do it. But yeah, let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So we revisit a character that, honestly, I'm shocked made it into this book. And it's Gabe from the previous book, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Now, the previous book, Gabe was really annoying, y'all. Gabe got under my skin so bad. I borderline hated him. In this, I think he's a little bit better. I think his monologue is still there. It's not quite as rich as the first book, but his personality is a whole lot more tolerable and stomachable. So I think this is an off-the-bat improvement here. Now, Gabe is flying to Cairo by himself. It's the following year after what happened in the Great Pyramid and the events of Curse of Mummy's Tomb. And this time his family's not with him. And he's on a plane, and he's talking about, you know, all this nice treatment he's getting from a flight stewardess, and how he can't wait to be in Cairo to see his Uncle Ben. He's kind of apprehensive about seeing his cousin Sari, but I think that those events in the prior book has kind of made him less annoyed with her, but he's still kind of annoyed with her. And he comes across like he doesn't really hold that much contempt against her as much as he did in the previous book. So he arrives in Cairo, and he's getting off out of the airport, and he's trying to go out into the big main area where there's cars everywhere and taxis. And he has this run-in with a taxi driver that he thinks it's his Uncle Ben playing a prank on him, but it turns out that it's just a real cab driver, right? And his uncle and his cousin Sari wave him down, and he narrowly escapes angering a cab driver and hops in the car with his Uncle Ben and his cousin Sari. And they immediately head out to this new pyramid that has not been explored before ever. And it's out in the desert, and they hop in the car and they head out into the desert. And it's revealed that they're going to be staying in tents this time, as opposed to Gabe's family's hotel room that they did in the previous book. So Gabe's like, okay, you know, I'm open to new experiences. I don't know what to expect. And he's brought this up on the plane, how has a summoner that played a role in the previous book as well. And I don't want to spoil that. But he brought it with him this time, and he considers it his good luck charm. He's kind of superstitious, and he's noticed that when he's touched his summoner, it's usually hot, but now it's really cold to the touch. And he can't quite put his finger on why. But when they arrive at this pyramid, he sees a bunch of tents all over the place, and there's a bunch of people outside of the pyramid. And there's a prank, kind of reminiscent to the first book, where one of the characters decided to dress up like a mummy. This time it's not Uncle Ben, like the previous book, it's one of his helpers that are there at the pyramid, and he gets jump scared by mummies, and Sorry kind of rubs it in his face like, oh, you're such a scaredy cat, Gabe, and pretty much you get reacquainted with why you dislike Sorry from the first book for majority of the book, at least, and I think she gets better near the end, but Sorry is pretty much the same character from the previous story here, and Gabe is excited because his uncle is pretty much on the verge of a new discovery. And after the jump scare, he's kind of worked up a little bit, but he goes back to the tent and his uncle gives him this pendant that's made of amber that has this bug inside of it. And Sorry kind of, picks on him about having the bug and the pendant and whatnot. But Gabe thinks it's kind of cool, and it's cold to the touch. He puts it around his neck, and he feels some kind of weird presence with it. He can't quite put his finger on it, right? Well, one day, it's time for them to go finally accompany their uncle into the pyramid to see what's down there. They have yet to do some excavation type of stuff. And the uncle kind of explains that he has a partner named Dr. Fielding who is helping the expedition, but he's not there currently. And before they're about to enter, they get stopped. And it's this journalist working for the Cairo Sun, and her name is Neela. She's named after the Nile River. And she reveals that she has talked on the phone with Dr. Fielding about doing an exclusive story for the Cairo Sun. And Uncle Ben is kind of thrown off by that, but it allows her to accompany them anyway while they go and look inside of the pyramid. And this time, they have to wear hard hats and lights, and they really can't venture off. And Uncle Ben's like, remember what you did last summer? And it got you in a lot of trouble, and all of us in a lot of trouble. Don't do it again. But since it's Gabe and Sorry takes it upon herself to, mess with Gabe a little bit and kind of wanders off in front of him. And he gets kind of lost, and he hits this wall, and like the previous book, he falls into like a black, into complete darkness and blackness, right? And he hits the ground below, and he feels the wind knocked out of him. And there's a really creepy scene dealing with spiders. I almost feel like this was added in here just to make the book a little bit scarier. But that scene got to me a little bit, and I'm kind of glad it was in here, because this was probably the scariest scene in the whole book. And Gabe, he's calling for help, and then finally they throw a ladder down to him, and all these people, like his cousin Sorry, his Uncle Ben, Neela, and I think one of his Ben's assistants are helping him get up on the ladder. When he gets out, he still feels the spiders crawling all over him, and he's really shaken up. But they keep pressing on, and they find this inscription. And when they read the inscription, Uncle Ben, since they're Egyptian, I forgot to mention this, they are Egyptians. Gabe's an Egyptian American, the same with Sorry, and I guess Uncle Ben as well. But Uncle Ben's like an Egyptologist and always over in Egypt doing research and stuff. And I guess there's, I don't know, like a connection to the ancient Egypt, culture and stuff. And Uncle Ben's like really into it. He's a professional scientist and whatnot. So he knows how to read hieroglyphics, and he reads the sign. And he says, oh, there's like a secret code to this. Well, they follow down this, they keep going down this unventured territory they've been excavating, and they find this mahogany door. And they notice that the mahogany door is a good sign, because mahogany wood is not native to Egypt. So they think that this has to be like the place where the tomb would be. And when they get there, there's a bright gold, lock that's holding the door in place, and they have to chisel it off. And when they're about to start chiseling it off, Neela's like, well, I really want to take a picture of this, after Uncle Ben told her that she's allowed to go in there to kind of observe and like write a story for the paper, but she's not allowed to take pictures or anything. But Uncle Ben's like, okay, you can take a picture. And while they're chiseling away, Dr. Fielding comes in behind them and pretty much tries to strong arm Uncle Ben to stop going any further. The inscriptions are giving an ominous warning. If you proceed any further, it's going to end badly, right? But they proceed on anyway, and they make their way into a room. It's completely empty. And I guess this is pretty good for these characters. Sorry and Gabe both feel like they hope that this room has stuff in it for Uncle Ben, so he can have this discovery of a lifetime. And he's explained the significance of this tomb. It belongs to this long forgotten prince named Koru, who is a relative to King Tut, the most famous mummy ever discovered. And this discovery can really put Uncle Ben in like the history books for this discovery, right? But there's an empty room, but there's an extra door. And they decide to push on through, do the same thing. This door is a little bit harder to open. And essentially, Uncle Ben uncovers a treasure trove. And they peer into the room. There's hieroglyphics all over the wall. There's a mummy case, which seals a sarcophagus in it. There's gold-laden things that the prince would have had during his lifetime. And everybody's just awestruck by the size of this room, by the valuables inside of it. And Uncle Ben's really excited. Like, he's like, I made a discovery of a lifetime. Neela seems to be excited. And everybody feels like they've been a part of such a monumental discovery. It's time to go celebrate. So they head back to the tents to celebrate a little bit. And Gabe and Sari are kind of just hanging out. Ever since the discovery, they haven't been allowed to go back inside for specific reasons. Neela's been kind of like, documenting some things with the uncle and stuff. So they've been like playing board games and, kind of just talking to each other, passing the time. And there comes to a point, right, after some mild filler here, that Gabe realizes something might be wrong, right? He overhears Dr. Fielding frantically looking for his Uncle Ben, and Dr. Fielding comes and asks them. They're like, "Well, what's going on here?" And of course, they witness Dr. Fielding going to grab Uncle Ben, and they head inside of the pyramid. And they wait a while, and after a while, Dr. Fielding comes out of the pyramid by himself. So this freaks out the kids, and they go up to Dr. Fielding and say, hey, what happened to Uncle Ben? And he seems to be ignoring them. And this rubs the kids the wrong way, and they feel like they have to go inside of the pyramid, right? And they decide to go, because why not? But Gabe checks for his good luck charm, his summoner, and it's missing. And this kind of upsets him, and he's like, wait, what happened to my summoner? This can't be happening. Something's wrong here. And Sari's pacing in front of the pyramid entrance, and they're like, hey, well, we have to go find Uncle Ben. I mean, Dr. Fielding's acting really weird, very strange. And mind you, there's something that happened that I skipped over, right? There's this secret code that Uncle Ben uncovered and was trying to keep a secret from Neela because she's a journalist and doesn't want it to get leaked. But he told the code to Gabe and Sari, and while they're, passing time a little bit during this filler portion, they may or may not chant the secret code the precise amount of times that could potentially activate the mummy to come to life. So with that realization, they think that something could have gone horribly wrong inside the pyramid. So they go inside and they're looking for him, Uncle Ben, calling names and whatnot. They make their way down to the tomb. And Sari notices that the lid is closed in the mummy case. And they go to open it. And they find something inside of it that may or may not be Uncle Ben, maybe the mummy. And this is where the climax happens, right? And I don't really want to spoil too much because the climax is very short in this book. This book's only 117 pages or 118 pages. And the climax is maybe 20 or even less pages, right? So essentially what happens is there's a big revelation, about what's in the mummy box. If there's a mummy alive, is Prince Koru alive? And there's a revelation about a certain character we saw throughout the story that may or may not be involved, and like a, I don't know, Deus Ex Machina type of twist where, well, it's not even like that because it's not shocking, but it tries to emulate that a little bit. And it's kind of reminiscent to Curse of the Mummy's Tomb in some ways, but essentially, Gabe and Sari this time are solo. They don't have the help of Uncle Ben like the previous book, so they have to find something to do to save the situation. And things start to look grim. But there's a thing that happens that Gabe does that kind of ties to one of the characters, and I haven't revealed this because if I tell you what it is, you'll guess what happens. But Gabe remembers something with a certain character, and he tries to do something to whatever this character may have. And it may work accidentally for him, and it may stop this character from achieving what they were trying to do. And maybe even save the day a little bit. And after they do so, everything seems to be back to normal, kind of. And Dr. Fielding and a group of people come in to rescue them, and of course, Uncle Ben's awake, and everybody's kind of shaken up, but there you go. I mean, they solved this. They solved the climax here, right? And then the ending happens that kind of plays into something that was revealed, potentially with these pendants, the pendant that Gabe was given, and I'll leave it at that. I'm trying to be vague as possible because this book is really easy to spoil. But in a nutshell, that is Return of the Mummy, right? So, okay, let's get into some positives about this book. Off the bat, I think Gabe is a bit better than he was in Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. If I'm being straight up. I think he didn't have the level of monologue that was in that first book, but here, I feel like he's more tolerable. I feel like he's more likable. I feel like he's more relatable, kind of more sassy, and I like that about him in this story. It's not really going too much into, how he analyzed things in the first book, and I kind of wish some elements were brought back from that style of writing in this story. But I kind of like that if he feels like he's matured from the previous book. You don't really get that too often in Goosebumps, but he still has that, resentment towards Sari a little bit, but it's dialed back, and he's definitely taken the more mature approach, and Sari has not developed at all, it appears. But she has her moments too, and I guess we'll go into Sari being a positive for once. She's really annoying in a good majority of the book, but she kind of comes around, and I think what happens to Uncle Ben in the story kind of makes her realize, like, hey, sometimes, pranks and jokes are fun, but when things get serious, there's no time to joke. And I think she kind of realized that all these jokes that she was making at Gabe's expense weren't really funny. Now, it doesn't really explicitly say that she came like full circle with that, but I definitely get that vibe from her, and I like Sari more as a result. Uncle Ben, I guess he's a more positive note for this book too, compared to the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb as well. He was just more of like a prank type of guy. He was involved with the kids, but he just had this childlike, nature to him, and he just kind of got annoying. Here, he still has that, but I think he's, I don't know, less, on Sari's side all the time, and I think he's more fair with Gabe, and I think I like him better here too. So for the three main characters, I think they're all better here. The setting is fun. An Egypt setting is a great, change of pace for a Goosebumps book. It does feel kind of samey in areas, kind of like Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Feels kind of played out, like you've seen this story before. But the atmosphere is good. Not as good as the first book, surprisingly. But, yeah, it works. It works fine. And, the spider scene was really good. That was really good. That really got to me. I'll give the book props for that. But that's about it for positives, right? For negatives, right? I wouldn't really say that this is a negative outright, but this book doesn't get too much wrong. But it feels very played safe. You know what I mean? Minus like the spider scene, it feels by the numbers. It's still in a sequel to Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, which is probably one of the most by the numbers Goosebumps books I've ever read. This is not quite to that level, but it's still kind of generic, right? And I feel like all the cool ideas they could have done with it, it just didn't capitalize on some cool things, some cool ideas. I was kind of hoping the pendant thing would have a cooler idea behind it than what we got. There was some setup involving the partner, Dr. Fielding, that I think would have been a really unique direction to go into. It would have been kind of reminiscent to the Deep Trouble books with certain characters. But, I digress. Him ending up being kind of a good guy isn't all that bad, but I think there could have been an added element there to make it more interesting. And I don't know, there's something about this book. It feels like it has a lot of filler to it. It's only 118 pages. I think the first 4 chapters are straight up filler, recapping the first book. I don't really like that in sequel books, especially in the original 62. I've noticed this the most. With some books, there's some heavy recapping. And this book did like 4 chapters of things that we completely read before in the first book. I get it, it's trying to catch up, right? But it's even taking plot points from the first book to kind of get you back up to speed with Gabe. And I feel like we're getting into rehash territory here. Now, is it a necessary rehash to do that for 4 chapters? No. As a whole book, I kind of feel like, comparatively to the first book at least, this could have been the first book, and we just could have gotten a single, Gabe adventure mummy story and made this book 5 and never had to touch it again. But I digress. That was, but the recapping parts were kind of annoying, and there are some really dull parts in the middle where it's just kind of meandering around, or you hit certain plot beats where you expect things to go, and it's not really riveting. It's not really throwing you monkey wrenches all that much. It's just like I said, it's paint by numbers. You know what's going to happen. It's predictable. Yeah, and I guess my last negative is the main villain here, Prince Koru, the Mummy. Prince Koru is a beloved mascot from the 90s, right? I loved my Prince Koru pillow growing up. I had a Prince Koru pillow, and I cherished that thing. All right, it was one of my favorite things as a kid. But he is really lame. he's a really lame villain. And the other villain, I'm not going to spoil who it is, but they're revealed so last minute, I don't feel like I get to enjoy them. It's one of those last minute throw a twist in there kind of things. Like I said, it's trying to emulate a Deus Ex Machina, but not really, because you kind of see this coming. But yeah, Prince Koru's a lame villain. How is he a mascot? I don't know. I guess because he looks cool and he's a mummy. But yeah, he's really lame. And the main villain of the story, can't really enjoy them. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at with this book. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, I don't think this book quite deserves a D compared to the original Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. I think it made improvements, and essentially kind of offers the same caliber of story that book had. And if that book didn't have crappy characters like Gabe and Sorry and Uncle Ben, how crappy they were in that book, I probably would have given that book a C. But I gave it a D, right? Here, I feel like I'm willing to give this a C. It's kind of mediocre, kind of uninspired in some ways. It's kind of forgettable, just like Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. But I think it's just a slight bit better. So I'm willing to give it a C, but not a high C. It's going to be a low one. So where I settled with this, I gave this a 3.6 out of 5. It's one of those perfectly fine books. Nothing spectacular whatsoever. It's very average. I deducted 1.4 points off the top just for all the negatives I mentioned. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I really don't have anything else to say. It's just, it exists and it's fine. Okay. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Return of the Mummy. Let me know down in the comment section down below. Do you love this book? Do you hate this book? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.